Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It is 6:07. It's O'Connor and Company this Friday morning in your nation's capital, and we have a loaded rundown for you. Starting at 7:05, we'll talk to Mark Moyer. He's the former director of USAID. He saw what was going on. He blew the whistle, and, well, wait till you hear what they did to him. 7:35, Ian Pryor talking about how Trump's executive orders on gender and sports are going to affect Northern Virginia schools, or those schools will lose their funding. 8:05, Raymond Arroyo give us a preview of how New Orleans is getting ready for the Super Bowl. And at 8:35, Brett Baer with Fox News Channel. It's Larry O'Connor alongside Patrice Onwuka. Good morning, Patrice.
Good morning. Good morning. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy Wear Red Day.
Yes, it is a happy Friday, unless, of course, you cash a paycheck from the United States Agency for International Development, known as USAID. Listen, I hate when anybody loses a job, but after I found out what this sort of a shadow slush fund organization operating its own, seems to be its own State Department CIA operation outside of even congressional oversight, outside of executive branch oversight, because look what happens as the executive branch comes in and says, hey, we'd like to see what you're doing over there, and everyone screams like you're
freaking
ending
out.
the world. Well, many people are losing their jobs over there. Here's White House counselor Alina Habba explaining it yesterday. Take a listen to this.
USAID, which has been under all of this scrutiny, they're going to cut the staffing from 14,000 down to 294 people over at USAID. Your thoughts on that?
I think it's very consistent after what we've learned. Look at what we learned with Politico, $8.1 million going to Politico, who funded ridiculous stories, hoax stories, witch hunt stories during an election. To me, sounds like election interference that was being funded by the Biden administration's USAID. I can tell you the craziest things I have ever heard, Rob. I literally wrote them down because I want to get them right, because the American people will be shocked when you understand what we are seeing. $6 million funding to Egypt for tourism, $7.9 million to Sri Lanka so that they know how to properly state their gender pronouns. These are the numbers that we're seeing coming in. $4.5 million to combat disinformation in Kazakhstan. I could go on, and we've heard about all of the other things. So Rubio is doing something consistent with what our administration is, as I suspected. He's been great, as has Doge. When you're not funding ridiculous things, you don't need thousands of employees on taxpayer dollars on payroll, because we're not going to spend money that way anymore. We're going to be responsible with the obligations and the responsibility that we've been given.
This is what we voted for. And by the way, Patrice, this is what I've been voting for every time I vote for a Republican for the last 30 years of my adult life. It's nice to see it actually happening. 14,000 people working over there, and Rubio says, yeah, we can get this job done with less than 300. That is amazing. A devastating blow. And naturally, of course, the unions representing the employees at USAID, they're suing. You can't do that to us. We're necessary. No, you're not.
And this is going to have spillover effects, because it's not just the employees at USAID. It's going to be all the nonprofits, the NGOs, the ecosystem of companies and organizations that depend on the grants that USAID sends out. And we know a couple of those, Catholic Charities, for example. I mean, we love to believe that they're just taking care of the poor, but they're also taking care of facilitating the illegal immigration flow through our southern border by the money that they're receiving. So it's going to be, the pain is going to be felt by a lot of different people, not just federal workers directly.
And if you're like me, you're looking at all of this unfold here and you think, hold on, what about when Trump was president last time? What was going on with USAID back then? We know that Samantha Power was running it under Biden administration. And Samantha Power is, I one of the people I like least in D.C. government. She was Obama's ambassador to the UN, and just a horrible track record. So, of course, she was rewarded with this incredibly powerful position where you can basically build your own policy in the shadows. Well, during the Trump administration, the first time, the director of USAID was Mark Moyer. Now, he's currently a military history professor at Hillsdale. He was there, and he saw a lot of this, and he tried to fix it, actually, the right way. I shouldn't say the right way. He tried to fix it the D.C. way, the protocol way. Not like, Elon Musk is going in there this time around with a freaking sledgehammer saying, to hell with it. We're just going to do it.
Just knocking down
Back
pillars
then,
in the building.
During Trump 1.0, everyone wanted to play nice and say, okay, well, we'll do this the way Washington does things. So here he was on Jesse Waters last night. Cut 7 here. We'll start with Mark Moyer.
So I didn't get into the agency till February 2018, and this is one of the big differences that we're already seeing. That in 2017, Trump administration was very slow to get into the agency. So I get there in February, and we have what's called a privilege walk as part of the orientation, where you are given an identity. Now, I was a Scandinavian woman, and so when they read lines like, I get discriminated against because of government services, or people don't look how I look. So you took a step forward if it applied, and if it didn't. And so I ended up near the front, and the indigenous woman with unwanted pregnancy and the male prostitute were at the other end, and then we talked about our privileges.
All right, so you were trained to be a Scandinavian woman in a privilege walk, not root out corruption. What kind of disguises do they use to fund these projects? I mean, do they just change the names of these things? Is there really some other reason we're doing this?
Yeah, they're very effective at rebranding things. So in the first Trump administration, the priorities were support national interests, as they are now. Another thing was countering terrorism and promoting self-reliance. So I went to a country, to give one example, they had a feminist women's book club that had been started under the Obama administration, and then they now said this is a counter-terror program because feminist women are key fighters in the battle against terrorism.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
You see that? We're now going to call this a counterterrorism program. So if you cut it, you're cutting counterterrorism. All right, a little bit more here. It's so enlightening. Here's Mr. Moyer.
What happened when you raised concerns that this thing was just a big corrupt money pit?
Yeah, so I reported one of my subordinates for criminal conflict of interest, and then the first discouraging sign was I was told, well, that's nice you want to do that. Most people here don't want to report corruption. Now, they didn't tell me why. I later figured out it's because you get in a lot of trouble. So I was accused of publishing classified information in something I'd written 2 years earlier, which had never been subjected to any prior question. And so they ultimately used that to fire me. Now, the people who were engaged in the corruption managed to hold on to their jobs. And so there's a culture of corruption that says if you are going to criticize anything corrupt, we're going to come after you. And we're going to use the tools that are supposed to be used to go after criminals to come after you. So they ended up firing me based on this bogus accusation.
There you go, Patrice. This is what happened, and now, of course, we see under this new administration they're not playing that game. Mark Moyer, that gentleman you just heard, is going to join us at 7:05. Any comments on this? Because this is tales all the time in Washington D.C. The corrupt people get called out on their corruption, and then they use the tools to actually destroy the life of the person who's blowing the whistle. That's what they did to Mark.
So 2 things stick out to me. Number 2, the serious one. You have to really take a scalpel to a lot of these programs because it sounds like they're very good at hiding sinister stuff under the guise of acceptable and needed programs. I mean, calling counterterrorism something that's just, an ideological agenda-driven activity, that means that you really have to go proposal by proposal and grant by grant. And the first thing that sticks out to me is, should we do that in our office, Larry? Do you want to be should I be the male prostitute and you would be the pregnant trans woman? I don't know. I mean,
don't threaten me with a good time.
That's so interesting to be that is what you need to be focusing your time on at USAID so you can understand people. That sounds just wacky to me.
I will let that pass, but I will say this. You're not going to bait me into that, Patrice. I will say this, though. You're right. I mean, when they try to hide these woke agenda programs, like the transgender opera in Ireland, and they say that it's a counterterrorism effect. You either need to take a scalpel to them to really remove all of the garbage from things that are actually good. That's one way to do it. Or hear me out. If they're doing that, you teach them a lesson by ripping the whole damn thing out from the roots, tossing it aside, get rid of all of it, and then you can go back and say, now, what is it you were really trying to achieve here? One by one, you can then re-implement things. And I think that's, frankly, the better way to do it, to make sure that you get rid of all the garbage. So that's how you go from 14,000 employees to 294 employees. Again, Mark Moyer, former director of USAID, joining us at 7:05. Right now it's 6:17. We better get straight to Jamie Whitten in the Indeed Carpet Cleaning Traffic Center.
All right, Larry, Patrice, easy look at traffic. No trash, no garbage, nothing in our way. 270, just the volume as you pass 109. And really, once past there, it is looking fantastic to the spur. The only bit of delay, it is starting to form on the Beltway Silver Spring, approaching Colesville Road past George Avenue. We knew that would start to fill in, but your travel lanes have been open. Crash had been on the Suitland Parkway inbound at First. Sterling cleared, so we're getting back to normal there. And the volume southbound on 295 to get past East Capitol Street. Now, from GarageDoorRepair.com, the WMAL Stormwatch 7 forecast.
Beltway in Silver Spring around Colesville backed up during the morning rush hour. Say it ain't
Go
so.
figure.
Honestly. Sunny skies today and breezy. High around 50 degrees. Tonight, partly cloudy. Overnight lows hovering around 30 degrees. And then tomorrow, get ready for a winter alert. We got snow turning into a wintry mix. Maybe some sleet and ice. A dangerous day, thankfully. Not a work day necessarily for most people. Tomorrow's high will be anywhere in the upper 30s there, maybe getting up to 40. Sunday will be partly sunny and breezy with highs in the 50s. Right now, it is the 6. Well, let's give the temperature first. Right now, it's 45 degrees. Come on, Larry. It's 45 degrees at 6:18.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
Well, we mentioned yesterday how Hillary Clinton decided that she needed to be relevant and comment on something that's truly her expertise, the Department of Transportation. What? For some reason, Hillary Clinton decided that a couple of days ago to start trolling Secretary of Transportation Duffy, Sean Duffy.
Yeah.
And it continued into another day. So it started out with Sean Duffy saying, "Big news! Talk to the Doge team. They're gonna plug in to help upgrade our aviation system, which is something that any sane person knows needs to be done. The systems that air traffic control and transportation are using are outdated." So Hillary Clinton replies and says they have no relevant experience. Most of them aren't old enough to rent a car, and you're going to let them mess with airline safety that's already deteriorated on your watch. Can I pause here for a second?
Wait,
I keep hearing this. Yeah. Oh, wait, no, she doesn't know what the hell she's talking about. But Patrice, I keep hearing this about the Doge team. It's like, oh, they're all like 22 and 23 years old, and they don't have experience. They're 22, 23. Aren't these the same people who told us that we should turn over our entire energy and transportation policy to a 17-year-old Asperger's girl from the Netherlands? Or was it Sweden? Right? Greta Thunberg is supposed to get a Nobel Prize, right, for reinventing energy consumption worldwide. And she was 17 years old and didn't know how to ride the bus, let alone how to manage transportation and energy systems. And now we're supposed to tell the Doge people, these geniuses who are working for Elon Musk, that because they're only 22 or 23 years old, they shouldn't have any sort of authority in what's going on with our government. It seems a little hypocritical.
It's actually ageism,
least.
Larry. I mean, I've been hearing that same argument. And by the way, have these folks ever walked around the Hill and visited a couple of congressional offices? Do you know what the average age in those congressional offices is? It's probably like 22, 23 years old. And these folks are actually advising members of Congress who are elected by the American people on policy. So let's stop with the young people are not smart enough argument.
Let's face it, the Democrats are currently run by Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, Joe Biden, Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi. Average age, I believe, is 78 amongst all of them. I mean, this is all these boomers have. And if they want to keep trashing the next generation and talking down to them like this, go right ahead. But I've seen the election trends and voting trends, and the youth vote is actually going in the Republican direction. All right, so Sean Duffy then followed up, because Hillary Clinton, they kept engaging with each other with these little snipes.
Okay.
And Hillary Clinton even bothered to blame Trump and Sean Duffy. Sean Duffy had been on the job for one day when the helicopter and airliner crash.
A week ago.
She tried to blame them for the D.C. American Airlines crash with the Black Hawk. So that was enough for Sean Duffy. So get this: you want to talk about bringing an atom bomb to the to the fist fight. Here's what Sean Duffy said. I know you're lashing out because Doge is uncovering your family's obscene grifting via USAID, but I won't let you lie and distort facts. So right there, he's referring to Chelsea Clinton making tens of millions of dollars.
Yes.
And I'd love that. The FAA administrator announced he resigned over a month before Trump took office. Air traffic controllers were always exempt from Trump's civil service buyouts. The previous administration shamelessly used Department of Transportation as a slush fund for the Green New scam, throwing away money and resources on wasteful environmental and social justice projects rather than updating our nation's antiquated air traffic control systems and other critical infrastructure. I'm returning this department to its mission of safety by using innovative technology in transportation and infrastructure. Your team had its chance and failed. We're moving on without you because the American people want us to make America's transportation system great again. And yes, we're bringing the 22-year-olds with us.
Whew.
Oh, man.
Fire.
That's
like
that's gonna leave a mark.
explosion. Oh my goodness. She's not going to try and clap back after that.
Yes. Needless to say, we have not heard a response from Hillary Clinton. We'll let you know as soon as someone writes it for her. It is 6:23.
Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
6:36. Wait, 6:37. I didn't want those 3 seconds to go by, just sort of hanging out there. It's 6:37 on this funky Friday on O'Connor and Company. Thanks for tuning in, where Patrice Onwuka does in fact bring in the noise and bring in da funk.
That's right, I do. Happy Friday, everybody.
We'll speak with the former director of USAID, Mark Moyer. 7:35, Ian Pryor. 8:05, Raymond Arroyo. And then 8:35, Brett Baer of Fox News Channel. Funky. I'm Larry O'Connor. So now let's talk about these EV charging stations that were really the pride and joy of the Biden administration. Pete Buttigieg, this will be on his gravestone, I think. He was mediocre at fixing potholes in the fourth largest city of Indiana, and he was able to waste billions of taxpayer dollars on electric vehicle charging stations. They got 8 of them installed, I think. Is that right?
I think so, before they finished up.
Maybe 9. And
but
that
they had a goal of $500,000, by the way.
Yeah. Well, and something, by the way, Elon Musk, Elon Musk, the guy who's like the bête noire of the left now, the Democrats hate him because he's making government efficient. Think about that for a minute. They're opposing a agency that is specifically charged with making government efficient because we can't have that. They hate Elon Musk, but back when they loved him because he was going to save the planet by converting everything to an electric vehicle, he actually did install a nationwide electric vehicle charging network, which is just incredibly effective, very smartly done. It actually pays for itself now, but of course the government tried to do the same thing, $5 billion in grants, and they got nothing out of it. So Trump has now ended it. He actually has ordered the states to stop with all the EV charging stations. And now, talk me through this, Patrice, because it seems to me that if you spent the money already and they're halfway through the project, is it wise to just abandon it? Probably because it was just going to cost more money and more money and more money, and he doesn't want to throw good money after bad. But also it sort of leaves even a worse taste in your mouth if they were even in the middle of the project and now it's all gone to waste and they get nothing out of it. But you know this stuff better than I do.
Absolutely. So apparently, maybe more than 8 charging stations had been created. AP News is saying it's actually 214 that are operational. So kudos, 214 out of the half a million charging stations by 2030. Now, part of part of this is that not all of the money that was allocated through the Inflation Reduction Act, I believe that's what it came through. Or sorry, the American Rescue Plan, I believe that's where it came out of. Either one, or maybe it was the transportation bill. But the money had been appropriated. It just had not necessarily gone out to the states. And so this is going to be one way that the Trump administration can pull back funds that have not been used on petty projects like these EV stations. I think it's a good idea. The government can't do them well. And even more than that, the market has spoken. Americans do not, or are not as interested in electric vehicles, nor is the infrastructure in place to support, the mass electric vehicle mandate that Biden had instituted. So why not let the private sector and the private market speak in this case? Well, and like you said, we both have Teslas, and we see that the private sector in that way is speaking, but not in the way that the government mandates would certainly demand.
Right. Yeah. No. They would argue that the infrastructure, that people aren't buying electric vehicles because the infrastructure isn't there to charge them, and that's why we need a government program to set up the infrastructure so that people can charge them. But it's this vicious circle that you keep running on. And listen, the private sector has spoken. Everybody knows that if you want an electric vehicle, you buy a Tesla, and there's plenty of charging stations for Teslas all around the place. Trust me, I have driven my Tesla to rural western Massachusetts. I have driven it down into the boondocks of the Virginia countryside. There's charging stations. You can do it. You can map out anywhere you want to go. And also you can install one in your home. But the bottom line is the private sector has already handled this problem. You don't need it. So then, of course, everyone's going to scream, well, what are we going to do then for energy? What are we going to do for energy? Well, what you're going to do is drill, baby, drill. And Secretary of the Interior, Doug Burgum, who knows his way around an oil and gas field, he announced yesterday that we're reopening millions of acres of federal land for oil drilling, and actually make good on that promise that President Trump said so many times at his rallies all through the election. Drill, baby, drill. Well, that's exactly what we're doing. They're revoking Joe Biden's offshore drilling bans, rolling back regulations, and unleashing the potential in Alaska. Remember, under the reconciliation package of 2017, the Trump tax cuts that got rolled through, embedded in there was freeing up the Anwar Wilderness area in Alaska for drilling. Biden suspended that unilaterally, even though it was federal law, and now Trump is re-implementing that. So all good stuff coming out of the Trump administration.
Absolutely. And one other piece of that, the Environmental Protection Agency, they're going to be getting rid of one of those hokey offices called the Environmental Justice Office. 168 employees have been put on leave. Well, these environmental justice folks, they are the ones who sue when there is a new drilling operation, whenever there is any sort of private sector investment in production. They'll come out of the woodworks. They'll say that there needs to be some sort of impact report on certain communities, and that's meant to slow down project development. That's meant to raise the cost of project development so that, frankly, the private sector companies will just get tired and not want to spend the money to produce whatever the projects are. So good riddance to another hokey social justice type agency office that is wasting our taxpayer dollars and, frankly, making our economy less productive.
It is 6:43.
WMAL, making sense of world events, because those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. Download the WMAL app to stream us for free.
Always bothers me, Patrice, when news people say we have a housing crisis in America. We have a homelessness crisis in America. That's not true. We do have what is referred to as homelessness. I call it criminal vagrancy. In certain parts of this country, mostly parts of the country that are dominated by Democrats in office. California is a perfect example of that. But we do need to do something about it. We care for our American citizens. We care for people who, for one reason or another, whether because of addiction or mental health issues, abusive situations, whatever it is, we don't like them to live in dangerous situations. And if we can do something as a society about it, we should. Now, you look at California and wonder, well, they've got so many resources there. They've got all these programs. Gavin Newsom has been promising to solve homelessness since he was mayor of San Francisco, like 15 years ago, and yet it keeps getting worse. So what's the problem? Well, one of the problems, I'll tell you, having known California's issues for a long time, is that if you have a homeless shelter, let's say you're a church or you're a mission and you've set up a homeless shelter to help people and house people, you have to follow certain rules.
Okay.
Otherwise, the government won't work with you, right? The
funding you, I mean?
Police won't send people to your shelter.
Oh,
Let's say
wow.
they're rounding up homeless people on the streets. They won't send them to certain shelters if they have certain rules. What are the rules? Like, for instance, one of the rules, I know for a fact, the mission, one of the downtown LA missions, was the most successful one, but it's a faith-based mission, and it's about rehab. And one of their rules was if you're addicted to drugs or alcohol, you got to be clean while you're here. So if you're caught using drugs, possessing drugs, or using or possessing alcohol, you can't be here. Well, the county of LA said, "Oh no, that's not going to work for us. That's discriminatory."
What?
So they would rather have the addict living on the sidewalk than actually have them getting clean and living in a shelter, which is the whole point. If you'd like, come and live in our shelter, but let's actually fix the root cause of your problem. All right, here's another one. Did you know that in Biden's HUD, Housing and Urban Development Department, money for homeless shelters would not be granted unless the homeless shelter specifically accommodated people based on their gender identity?
Oh,
In other
no,
words.
no. That's
Oh, yes,
yes. We will be training our fire to, well, yes. IWF will be on all over
In
this
other
if we're
words,
not
if
already.
let's say you set up a women's shelter. So a lot of
Yes,
women
exactly.
tragically are homeless because if they go home, they'll get beaten up by their boyfriend or
Exactly.
their spouse.
Yes.
So instead they live in their car. They're terrified they have no place to go. So you set up a women's shelter. And you say, okay, we have a shelter for women to protect them. But then if a dude shows up dressed as a woman and wants to live in that shelter, and understand a lot of these women are fleeing violent situations where
Absolutely.
men abuse
They're
them.
battered.
And now these shelters under Biden were forced to allow these men to be in these shelters. Otherwise, they would not get any federal funding. Well, your brand new Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Scott Turner, Redskins legend, Scott Turner, just threw that in the trash where it belongs, which is just the start of things that should be done here in a department like HUD.
Excellent. That's amazing. And folks, just a reminder, women's sports is just the tip of the iceberg. There are so many other areas that we need to protect women in women-only spaces. Shelters, one, prisons, one. So I know we're celebrating women's sports wins this week, but steps like this to protect women's shelters are just as important, and we'll need legislation and we'll need, whatever it takes to make sure that women are protected wherever they are. But great work, HUD.
But
HUD,
absolutely. Also, by the way, thank you. You're 100% right. Also, at the National Prayer Breakfast, President Trump talked about a new executive order that he's signing having to do with Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, focusing on anti-Christian bias. Take a listen to this.
To confront such weaponization and religious persecution, today I'm signing an executive order to make our Attorney General, who's a great person, she's going to be a great Attorney General, Pam Bondi, the head of a task force, brand new, to eradicate anti-Christian bias. About time, right? Anti-Christian bias.
Yeah, now listen, there are a lot of critics who are saying, what are you talking about? There's no anti-Christian bias in the federal government. There's discrimination against Christians in the federal government? And my answer will
Where
be,
have they been?
well, if there isn't any, if there isn't any, then you have nothing to worry
This
about.
is ineffective, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, maybe it
let's
means
see
now
what
that the
this task force
DOJ will
ends up.
look after, women who are praying on the street in front of a abortion center rather than,
That's right.
trying to arrest them, or people who target pregnancy crisis centers, for violence.
For
maybe
being faith-based
that's
institutions, or
Christian
spying on
faith-based.
and tracking Catholics because they choose to go to the Latin Mass instead of the Novus Ordo. 6:52.
All right, we'll see.